start to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Welcome to Prevention Through Connection. I'm Kathy Samuels, Project Director for the Manhasset Community Coalition Against Substance Abuse, also known as CASA. Today's program, Stress and Screens, How to Thrive, Not Just Survive, is a special edition of Prevention Through Connection. The program features Dr. Edward Hallowell, best-selling New York Times author, who will provide groundbreaking advice about the effects our 24/7 technological world has on our families, teens, and young adults. Dr. Hallowell is a child and adult psychiatrist, leading authority in the field of ADHD, and co-author of the groundbreaking New York Times bestseller, Driven to Distraction. He has been frequently featured on 60 Minutes, Oprah, 2020, the BBC, CNN, Dateline, as well as featured in Newsweek and the New York Times, and many national and local news programs. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Edward Hallowell.
Thank you. Thank you. So you can hear me fine without the microphone? Great, great. Since we have a fairly small group, let me just ask you, or a couple or a few of you, what do you want me to really get into this evening? What brought you out on
How do we get them off the screens?
How do we get them? Okay, all right, very good. And what other?
How does it affect the child with ADHD?
Okay, so weave in some stuff about ADHD. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, let me give it a wider framework, if I can, because we're living in a very special time in history. It's unique. We are, the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. We are living in very interesting times, and I'm 67 years old. I won't live long enough to see how it all pans out, but we're really on a maiden voyage. Not since Gutenberg invented the printing press has a technology changed everyday life. Everyday life. We're not talking about remote life. Everyday life, the way the invention of electronic communications technology has changed the way we live every day, the way kids go to school, the way businesses are run, the way relationships are conducted. Pretty much everything we do is impacted minute to minute by these electronic devices. And it's hard for us to make sense of it because we're in the midst of it. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Not true when it comes to this, because we've never seen it before. We've never been living with this before. So we can't look to historical precedents and say, well, how did they deal with this back in the Roman Empire? Or how did they deal with this, 100 years ago? We're the experimental animals. And we're part of a massive behavioral conditioning experiment. We're like so many lab rats. And in many ways, we're behaving as if we had no control. And that's what I want to caution you against this evening. Whether you're talking about your role as a parent, or your role as a partner, or your role as a business manager, employee, whatever your role. My role as a doctor, medicine has been changed dramatically. I went to see my orthopedic surgeon. I have 2 artificial hips, and he was practically in tears talking about how the electronic records requirements keep him from talking to patients. I mean, so it's everywhere you look, you see the unintended consequences. At the same time, I'm no Luddite. I'm not saying, oh, let's turn back the clock. Number one, we couldn't if we wanted to. But number two, this technology does a lot of good. We're able to do things in seconds that used to take weeks, months. As a writer, believe me, word processing changed my life dramatically. I remember my first book I wrote longhand because I was not very good on the old-fashioned typewriters. And then, and then it was a matter of carbon paper and eraser tape and all that. And now it's just fantastic what you can do as a writer. So the technology used properly is a tremendous blessing. Used improperly, it's a terrible curse. And I'd like to give you some thoughts on that, and then have time for you to ask questions. As I was saying to the lady who's a reporter before we started, what I call the modern paradox is what we're living in the midst of. We are super connected electronically, like never before in human history. It's the defining achievement of our era. Historians will look back and talk about these years as the years that the entire globe became so connected. You really can't be anywhere and not be reached. You ask someone, where do you do your best thinking? Rarely do they say at work. Most favorite answer I get, in the shower. It's the one place you can't be reached. And now the iPhone is waterproof, that's going to be gone too. So there really is no place. When I'm old enough to remember when the mail used to come once or twice a day. Now it comes once or twice a second. And we're still rushing to get the mail as if it were coming once or twice a day, because there's something irresistible about an unopened message. And that's one of the little traps that this technology sets. You've got to open it, even if you know it's stupid, even if you know it's annoying or boring. You've got to open it. And again, as I say, we're these lab rats that are behaving as if we had no control. We're allowing ourselves to become crazy busy. I wrote a book some years ago called Crazy Busy, Overbooked, Overstretched, and About to Snap. And it's this phenomenon that if we don't become aware of it, we allow ourselves to go faster and faster and faster. Our response to becoming overbooked and having more to do than time to do it is not to begin to eliminate things, it's to try to go faster. And we've literally fallen in love with the phenomenon of speed. Do you know what the most frequently changed part on an elevator is? The door close button. People get onto the elevator, start pounding door close, whether they're in a hurry or not. They just want to get there faster. I do a lot of food shopping. My wife and I are big foodies. God forbid I should get behind someone who's paying with a check, because it takes forever. I want to say, why doesn't that person get a credit card, for goodness sake? Doesn't they know we're all in a hurry? In a hurry to get where? To the next place where we can hurry. And again, it's this internal reflex that we don't examine, we just respond to it. And truly, again, the little lab rats, we just keep going faster and faster, trying to keep up, unable to exercise any kind of restraint. And that paradox is we are super connected electronically, but what we've allowed to happen is that we're disconnecting interpersonally. And that's the paradox. You would think that the technology would serve the human connection. Instead, it's replacing it. and you find people feeling more and more alone. Not being alone, but feeling alone. And lest you think that is a trivial matter, the Surgeon General of the United States was asked, what is the number one medical problem facing the United States today? Number one medical problem facing this country today. You'd think heart disease, you'd think high blood pressure, you'd think obesity, you'd think cancer. No. According to our Surgeon General, the number one medical problem facing the country today is social isolation. People feeling more alone. It is a medical problem. And most people don't realize this, but it has been proven over and over again, so now it is an accepted medical fact, that social isolation is as dangerous a risk factor for early death as cigarette smoking. Feeling alone, feeling lonely, even if you're surrounded by people, is really bad for you. It is as dangerous as smoking cigarettes. And most people don't realize that. If I asked you all to list the risk factors for early death, or you'd tick off high blood pressure, family history, cigarette smoking, obesity, cholesterol, not wear your seatbelts, you know all of those, none of you probably would say social isolation. Because we don't realize how bad it is, largely because it's never been this bad. It's never been the kind of problem it is today. People have never been as isolated, and as I say, it's paradoxical because we look like we're just one big, jolly, connected family. On Facebook, on Twitter, on email, on website, we think, oh my gosh, we're all so connected. Well, we're electronically connected, but we're not connected in the way that matters. We're not connected in the way that's meaningful, in the way that you see, disconnection depresses immune function, depresses the kind of neurochemicals you need for well-being. It reduces your capacity to feel the kind of zest you want to feel for life. It induces a kind of low-grade lethargy, a kind of I'm alive but not loving it. And I call that a deficiency of the other vitamin C, vitamin Connect. The beauty of this fact is that vitamin Connect is free. By coming here tonight, you have basically self-selected as people who want to connect. Instead of watching this online, and nothing against the people who are, but instead of watching it virtually, you went to the trouble, and it's considerable trouble, of coming out after work, getting dressed. You could be lying in your bathrobe at home or something. You're getting dressed, meeting people, never know who you're going to meet, risking your life in the roadways. You did all you had to do to show up here in person. And in so doing, I can tell you, you all are connectors. You all are the people who this world really needs, because you'll go out of your way to show up somewhere in person. And it's in your DNA. The world really needs you now. I won't go into all the science, but it's abundant. Christakis and Fowler's great book, Connected, if you want to read it, if you want a resource, it details the many ways in which this has been proven scientific fact, that we need the human connection. And what's happened is the electronic moment is displacing the human moment. The electronic moment, which is wonderful in its own way for the right reasons, is displacing the human moment. And you need the human moment for things like trust and love and the conveyance of this force that humans can convey to one another in person but can't do any other way. And we take it for granted. We don't realize the damage we're doing to ourselves. You know, we talk about pollution and global warming and all that. Well, this one is right there, equally important, if not more so, and it's not being talked about. Good news is you have the power to solve it. Tonight, you can go home and say, I resolve from this day forward to every day get my doses of Vitamin Connect. And I'm going to see to it that my children do, that my partners do, that the people I work with do. I'm going to give it to strangers on the street by smiling at them. And guess what? You get something. It's not just them who get something. I may feel artificial, but go ahead and do it anyway. It works. I'm going to walk around from this day forward intentionally connecting, intentionally, and that also means I'm going to walk around not being open to everyone everywhere all the time. Because in order to have a richly, positively connected life, you have to have boundaries. You have to not be this totally permeable membrane that says, have at me, world. Because one of the facts, Newton's law of modern life, if you don't take your time, it will be taken from you. If you don't prioritize and reserve time for what matters most to you, family dinner, walking the dog, going to church or synagogue, I don't know what matters most to you, but things that are just rich in Vitamin Connect, you have to protect them. You have to say, no, I can't give that time away. No, I can't let people interrupt me during dinner with a text message or with a cell phone. And I won't let my children do that. And when they say why, explain to them that it's a medical matter. It's much more than just mommy likes to deny you pleasure in every way she possibly can. You know, it's a matter, it's at least as important as brushing your teeth, indeed much more important. But the great news is we do have the power to control this, to prioritize, to decide what does matter most, and then build the boundaries so we're sure to get it. So you don't end up being the kind of person, which is altogether too common, who collapses into bed at the end of every day saying, oh, another day where I didn't get done what I wanted to get done. Another day where I was run ragged. Another day where I dealt with unexpected interruptions, almost always bad news. Another day when I got angry at people I wished I hadn't of, where I lost my patience, where I felt depleted, where I just didn't be the person I wanted to be. How many times do you end your day like that? And it's so common. Well, the reason is you're not using the control you do have. You're not creating boundaries. You're not prioritizing. You're not training your family, your friends, your coworkers as to when you can be reached and when you can't be reached. People will respect you for doing it. If you say, I'm off email between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., at first they'll complain, and then they'll get used to it, and they'll say, yeah, you can't reach her. You know, she has this weird habit of, and then they'll say, gee, why don't I try that? You know, why am I giving it away? Why don't I? Tim Armstrong, who's the CEO of AOL, totally turning that company around. He engineered the merger with Verizon. AOL is on the ascendance big time. And he says the key to what he's done at AOL, I've gotten to know him because he has ADD. He's very public about that. And the key to what he's done at AOL, he mandated what he calls 10% think time. He requires all his folks at AOL, all his executives, to spend 10%, that's not all that much, 10% of every week, thinking. Door closed, no electronics, no meetings, just thinking. And then they have to come and report to him on what they thought about. And they might say, you know, they don't have to win the Nobel Prize during that time, but they do have to demonstrate that they did spend the time thinking. And he said, my gosh, the quality of people's ideas has just gone way up. He said, people used to rush into my office, I got this idea, and they clearly had not thought it through. He said, I could poke holes in it in a second. He said, now they come in with ideas that are really thought through, that can actually advance the mission of AOL. Just 10%. 10% think time. So imagine if you did that for yourself. If you said, I'm going to have 10% of my week thinking. Or 10% connect time. 10% of my week I'm going to spend connecting, not online. And connection comes in many different shapes and sizes. It doesn't just have to be a conversation with another human, although that's really the best. And you want to make sure you make time. I mean, I'll just give you sort of a prescription for how to lead a connected life, and by that I don't mean access to the internet. Connect with friends. Make friends a priority. I have a squash game on Tuesday afternoons that I've been playing with the same man for 35 years. That Tuesday afternoon squash game is an absolute pillar of my sanity. We play squash, we go out and have a few beers, and we've been doing it for 35 years. I'm his daughter's godfather, he's my daughter's godfather, we're best friends. I lose money because I stop work early. He loses money. I lose chance to advance my career. We throw out the window 3 or 4 hours on Tuesday afternoon. But my gosh, what we get back is so much more valuable. People, particularly men, don't realize the return on investment, if you will, of nurturing a very deep friendship. You don't want to have 1,000 friends. That's the absurdity of Facebook. 1,000 friends. They're not friends. They're whatever they are. They're data points. But 1 or 2 deep friendships, oh my gosh, it extends your life. It deepens your life. It brings what we call meaning. And that's the problem in modern life if you're not careful. It's all so superficial. It's plentiful, but it's shallow. It's a lot of data points, but very little depth. So, time for a friend. Time for your partner, if you happen to have a person that you live with. Time for not just, what are you doing, when am I going to see you? A time for intimacy. The single biggest sexual problem in the country today has nothing to do with erectile dysfunction. It's people aren't making love as much as they would like to. Why? Because at the end of the day, when they would otherwise be doing that, they want to go to sleep. They don't make time for lovemaking. And if they don't make time for lovemaking, they don't make time for intimate conversation. I parody an ADD romantic conversation. Okay, so you love me. What's your next point? And that can be the way intimate relationships go. It's just always wanting the next bit of stimulation without going into any depth. So make time for in-depth. If it's not actually making love, it's conveying love, feeling love, expressing love, lingering. You can be expressing love and just be talking about the tree in the backyard. So you don't have to be, saying how much I love you, honey. You can be feeling love back and forth, talking about something seemingly innocuous. Make time for places that matter to you, traditions, rituals, connecting to the past, connecting to larger, whatever is larger than self. Make time for connecting to favorite activities, whatever they might happen to be. A garden. People who love gardening can spend 3 hours in their garden and feel so replenished. So you're basically connecting with an activity, with nature, again, doesn't have to be with a person. Pets, they happen to be my favorite. Dogs. Everyone should have a dog. Now, if you're a cat person, okay, that's okay, I guess. I can sort of understand you, but gosh, if you can possibly have a dog, have a dog. Dogs are just God's most bountiful givers of love, unconditional. And yes, they produce poops, but boy, are they ever worth it. So if you can possibly have a dog, have a dog. The only problem with dogs is they die too young. They don't live long enough. But then you get another dog. You send one to heaven and you get another dog. So pets, places, people, rituals, activities, groups, organizations, and you see most of these are free or cost very little. And all it really requires is that you prioritize, that you stop, that you take back control that you've given away, that you stop being the little rat in the global behavioral conditioning experiment. You say, no, my time on this planet is brief enough. I'm not going to give it away to superficial data processing. I'm going to insist that I see my sister once a month, or I'm going to insist that I walk my dog, or I'm going to insist that I cuddle up with the person I love. I'm going to insist on this. I'm not going to let modern life rob me of it. And if you do that, I mean, the rewards are immense. Longevity, fulfillment, happiness, just a zest for life will come back instead of feeling harried and all that. And then you can begin to master this little thing, this little screen that we have allowed to worm its way into our existence. You said, how do we get them off of them? And it's not a trivial question, because these electronics have become the newest form of addiction. It began as a joke. We talked about the crackberry, and everyone kind of laughed. It ain't a joke anymore. These things, if not actual addictions, they're heading in that direction. It's a bad habit. It's something, I can't tell you in my practice how many couples argue over, one of them calls her husband's iPhone his plastic mistress. And he says, you're with it far more than you're with me. And you're more devoted to it, and it captivates you in a way that I can't. I can't compete with it, she says. Well, and that's because these screens, when the screens were one way, when it was television, that was one thing, and people could overdo television. But now, the screen has become interactive. And what that does is it opens up the dopamine circuitry. And that's what drives all addictions. All addictions. It's all about this little squirt of dopamine. And once you get it, you want to keep getting it. And opening your email, surfing the net, it becomes in and of itself at least habit forming, and it can progress right along to addiction. There are now inpatient treatment units for people who have electronic screen addiction. Inpatient, and when you take away their screens, they do what addicts do. They'll become violent. They'll attack their parents who take them away, literally attack them, beat them up. In the inpatient units, they'll go into withdrawal. Heart rate will rise, blood pressure will rise, they'll become diaphoretic, they'll start sweating. They will go into withdrawal because again, it's the dopamine circuitry, craving, demanding, willing to commit a crime to get your fix. So what began as trivial is anything but. Now, for most addictions, the treatment model that prevails is abstinence. 12-step programs, it's all about abstinence. You can't do that with electronics. You can't live in today's world. You can, but it's difficult. Oh, by the way, this tie, I just came back from going to a practice day at the Masters on Tuesday. They do not allow cell phones on the property. So it was an entire day of very high-functioning people walking around forbidden to have their, if they catch you with your cell phone, they throw you out. And they're very serious about it. They escort you right out, as if you had a machine gun or something. And it was just, you could see and feel the serenity of the place. And this was a major golf tournament, so they weren't there to take a rest. They were walking and watching, and no cell phones allowed. And so it is doable, but if you don't have some policy, if you don't take charge, these little devices take charge of you, and you develop a habit. I call it screen sucking in my book. Screen sucking takes over, and any free moment, instead of sitting back and reflecting on life, you go like this. You're in the airport. Notice what people are doing during delays, waiting for plane. Are they striking up conversations with strangers? Are they reading some interesting book? No, they're either looking at Wolf Blitzer coming down from CNN, or they've got their little iPhone. And believe me, I'm not setting myself up as any better. I'll do the same thing. I'll bring it out, start. For what? You know, it's just a conditioned reflex. So, so abstinence is not the answer. It is a possibility, much more possible than you think. The model that is analogous is food. We all have to learn to eat in moderation. Similarly, we all need to learn how to screen suck in moderation. Some is good, probably necessary for most of our lives. But when it becomes too much, that's when you need to get out of the addict's favorite defense, which is denial. I don't have a problem with it. And own it. And then work with your family, work with your place of work, work with whatever, to help each other. Because everybody has the problem. It's not just the kids. We all wrestle with it. Help each other turn them off. TIO, turn it off, for certain amounts of time. Don't take it to bed with you. I mean, that began as a joke. It's not a joke. Couples that I see regularly, usually the husband, and the wife humbly says, could you leave your cell phone downstairs? No, I can't. I have to have it. And it's comical to listen to him justify why he has to have his cell phone next to his bed in case someone wants him at 3 a.m. You know, I say, what did you do 20 years ago? You know, it's just, these are typical excuses that addicts make, and people who otherwise are very reasonable make these absurd justifications for why they have to have their little fix. It is the biggest obstacle, in my opinion, to leading a richly connected life, connected interpersonally life that we face in modern life. And again, such good news, unlike global warming or terrorism, or this, we have it in our power to solve in our own individual lives. We owe it to our children to take it seriously. We owe it to our coworkers, because everyone in the workplace is wrestling with this. You alone shouldn't be making up the policy, but you should raise it as a matter of discussion in wherever you work, because it's a big deal. And then have a, whatever forum you bring things like that up in, to develop a policy. And every productivity will go up, believe me, like Tim Armstrong at AOL. Productivity will go up. You modify this just slightly, you will, number one, be more productive, but number two, you'll be happier. You'll be calmer. You'll come out of that frantic state people get into when they're overbooked, overworked, and about to snap. Do you know that 20 minutes out of every hour, this has been studied extensively, in your average workplace, 20 minutes out of every hour are devoted to uninterrupted, unplanned interruptions. Unplanned interruptions. Typically, an email, a text, sometimes someone knocking on the door, but first of all, doors are usually open, and people don't knock on doors anymore, they send texts. You know, so unplanned interruptions. And what happens when you get interrupted, not only does it break your train of thought, but we're not machines, so we can't get right back to where we were. We have to kind of reconstitute, and often these interruptions are annoying. So we have to get out of the bad mood the interruption put us into. And that's not easy to do. You're sitting there, why this son of a, and you can't refocus with the same degree of intensity that you could before. I'm going to stop in a minute, because I want to take your questions and discuss all this. But the fundamental message that I have for you is to take back control, to stop being the rat in the global behavioral conditioning experiment, to take back control and to do it as a team, be it a family, a school, a workplace, a community, to do it as a team, to recognize what the Surgeon General calls the #1 medical problem we're facing today. You know, the modern paradox of super-connected electronically, interpersonally increasingly disconnected. Recommit, or commit for the first time, to what matters most to you. And that relationships, a project at work you know you're not doing justice to because you're allowing yourself to be interrupted so much. Commit that 10% think time to in developing that project fully, completely. A garden, if that's what you happen to love, a boat, golf, you know, whatever it might happen to be. Give yourself permission. You know, this time spent connecting is not a frill. It is not a frill. And the solution to modern life is not to work harder, it's to work smarter. And to love smarter. To connect smarter. To use the knowledge we have and to use the freedom we have to make choices that pretty much everyone would like to make. I doubt there's a person in this room who will raise their hand or his hand and say, that's nonsense, I wish I were busier. You know, maybe one or two of you, but for most people, it's where do I find some peace and quiet? Where do I find some time to be with the people I love, to work on, it's not just love, it's work, to work on the work that matters to me, to develop these ideas that I've had and I keep chronically putting on the back burner, to fulfill my dreams. And the beauty, particularly of living in this country, is we have the freedoms, the political freedoms to do that, but psychologically, we are allowing ourselves to be imprisoned by demands we didn't mean to accept, obligations we didn't mean to sign up for. And I guess I'm saying to you, get rid of the leeches in your life, get rid of the people and projects that aren't worth it, and instead cultivate the lilies, the people or projects that are worth it. In my own case, the top of the list, my kids, my wife, and the books I'm writing and the patients I see. Those are all lilies. And so I try to get rid of overcommitment, screen-sucking time. And it's always a battle, you know. At core, I'm an addict at heart, you know. I'll overdo anything, you know. So I have to watch it. I have to always watch it. And if I can do it, you can do it, for sure. Well, let me stop there and discuss these. Yeah, ADD, people with ADD are 8 times more likely to develop an addiction of any kind. So 8 times more likely a screen addiction, 8 times more likely alcohol, 8 times more likely gambling, shopping, spending. Those last ones are really facilitated by the internet. Now we're seeing a tsunami of sex addicts, tsunami of gambling addicts, tsunami of shopping addicts. I mean, Amazon is like, you know, whoa, welcome, you addicts, you know, come spend with me, you know, and it happens. It happens. So just know if you, like I have ADD, I have to watch that. I have to watch that, and I'll just get on there, and I'll just start shopping. And because it's fun, it feels good. You get the dopamine squirt. Oh, I bought, you know. So I try to minimize my purchases to small items, toothpaste or something. Right? So I don't get into a power struggle. This is not mom telling you to be a good boy. This is me, some outside stranger, trying to alert you to dangers that can really bring you down. I mean, it really can. On the other hand, your knowledge of the technology can take you to the top. So it's very much a double-edged sword, like everything in the world of ADD. It can be a tremendous asset, or it can be a horrible liability. It's all a matter of learning how to manage it. And so don't do it alone. Do it in collaboration. You know, talk to other people. One of my rules of life, never worry alone. You got to find the right people to worry with on whatever topic it might be, but bad things happen when you're worrying alone. Never worry alone. So, and you know, kudos to you for coming out. I'm sure this was not top of your list of what you wanted to do tonight. So my congratulations, and I hope it was worth your while. But you know, so you took it seriously enough to say, okay, I'll schlep out and do this, and good for you, because this is, if you take what I'm saying seriously, you can really handle it and avoid Big, huge problems. Big, huge problems. I have 3 children. They're 27, 24, and 21, and they grew up with this stuff. And they're far more related than I was at their age. So I'm not one of these, oh, these kids, all they can do is text and they can't talk. That's a possible outcome. And that happens when you let the electronics replace the social interaction. But used properly, these electronics are a tremendous asset. And my kids are as social as you could be, and I know many who are. So I'm not a doomsayer at all. I am saying if you're not careful, just like I said to this young man, if you're not careful, it can be real bad. But if you are careful, it can be real good. And my daughter, she works at Gray Advertising in Manhattan. She runs the NFL account. She made the Super Bowl babies ads in the Super Bowl, and she relies heavily on all this technology, and she's loving it, and that's the way it should be. You're in charge of the technology, not the technology in charge of you. And if you do that, then today's world is the best we've ever seen. This is great being alive in this era. If you take that dictum seriously, you be in charge of it, don't let it be in charge of you. So you have to have a longer conversation. You have to bring him to see me, or you have to make it into a bigger, you can't do a quick fix because you will lose. You have to somehow or other get him to buy into it as an issue that will seriously impact his future, because it will. It will. But what's he doing now?
Not his homework.
No, I mean, is he in school?
Yeah,
And
he's 16.
And he's doing okay?
Could be better.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is just looking at you real quick and the fact that you're here, my hunch is he's better off than you think. And my hunch is you're kind of shocked at how attached he is to it, but he is doing what he needs to do.
I'm not shocked because
They're all,
it's
yeah.
just the norm.
Yeah, okay, so you're kind of shaking your head saying, I can't compete with this, I don't like it. But he is doing the things that he needs to do. And
After I took it away during the week,
go on, then how did you manage,
Gaming.
and how did you do that?
I beat him.
By the way, bribery is fine. Any expert who says you shouldn't bribe children doesn't have children. So bribing is fine. Doing whatever you need to do, using what authority you have. But then, as he gets older, you want to use the force of truth, of persuasion, of knowledge, and try to help him. Just as this kid was willing to come out, and
Dragged him out.
I'm sure she did. One way or another, she got him here. And truly, it is not out of the realm. I mean, I have people coming to my office for a consultation about this and having a discussion, not in the heat of the moment, and let him advance why he should have unlimited access to it, and let you, and then I can give him the scientific evidence, which is hugely on the side of learning moderation, not abstinence, but some degree of moderation. You don't have blackouts, but unsuccessful attempts to cut back, impaired performance, in school or for adults in the workplace, impaired relationships, other people commenting that it's a problem. The same things you see for an addiction to alcohol. Not blackouts, but sort of the equivalent of a blackout. People will be online and not remember A, what sites they visited, B, what they did online, and C, how much time they spent there. It's not a full-fledged chemically induced blackout, but it's pretty darn close. That's why you want to attack the denial and say, how much time have you spent? What else could you have been doing? How are your grades? How is the quality of your relationship with your friends? How are you doing on the teams that you used to play on? How's your relationship with mom and dad? I mean, just go down the list, and if you find point, time after time after time after time, there's impairment. Quacks like a duck, you know. I mean, and again, you're dealing with denial. These people don't want to give up their binky. You know, what? Take it away from me? What am I going to do? It's unthinkable. And so you have to bring it out of that realm of really crazy thinking and bring it into the realm of, you know, can we have a reasonable discussion about this? Because the way you're dealing with it is way unreasonable. And you have a lot of conversations like that with teenagers. Don't do what too many people do and say, I give up. You begin with what you can, if not control, at least influence. And that's what happens at home. So you have the conversation. And then you can expand the conversation. I mean, schools are clearly interested in this and get the school in the act. And most schools are now. They have policies. What I can do is set in motion a process, because that's what this requires, a process. And as this lady points out, a lot of parents are behaving as if they didn't have the power to influence it. It's not going to get taken care of, particularly when it reaches the advanced stages that it reaches, where people are literally having violent fights at home over it. It's not going to be taken care of quickly. But it is really important that it be taken care of, because like any addiction, the longer it goes undealt with, the worse it gets. And I sure hope I didn't give off the notion all you need to do is have a conversation. It's like, obviously not. You know, someone's an alcoholic, you don't have to say, oh, well, just quit drinking. You know, so it's a process, and with some people, particularly people who have ADD, it's a lifelong process. I wrestle with these yearnings every day, you know, and it's part of it's the downside of ADD. Just so you know, though, the upside of ADD is much better than the downside. I can't leave you all without putting in a plug for the way ADD should be looked at. Attention deficit disorder is a terrible term. It's not a deficit, it's not a disorder. Used properly, it's an incredible asset. It's like you have a Ferrari engine for a brain with bicycle brakes. And I'm a brake specialist, you know. So once you strengthen those brakes, you become a champion. If you don't strengthen those brakes, it's the prison population. It's the addicted population. It's the unemployed population. It's the multiply divorced. So undealt with, unrecognized, ADD is a horrible curse. Dealt with and recognized, Tim Armstrong, the CEO of AOL, David Neilman, the founder of JetBlue, Nobel Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners. I could fill this room many times over with incredibly talented, successful people. I think we should rename the condition the entrepreneur's trait, because almost every entrepreneur has it. The big problem with ADD is the stigma that surrounds it, and people thinking it means you're wacko and unreliable and irresponsible, which is not true. You may be, but once you strengthen those brakes, you become pretty special. And even the core triad of symptoms that we associate with ADD, distractibility, impulsivity, and restlessness, turn each one of those on its head and you get a positive. Flip side of distractibility is curiosity. That's a major asset. What is impulsivity? What is creativity? But impulsivity gone right. You don't plan to have a creative thought. You don't say, it's 2 o'clock, time for my creative idea, and lay it like an egg. You know, the creativity depends upon disinhibition, depends upon brakes that aren't too tight. And then restlessness, hyperactivity, you get to be my age, it's called energy. You know, and so, you know, so again, it's once we blow the lid off this terrible dark cloud of stigma that still is around it, and once we let kids and adults, because the biggest undiagnosed population are adults, once we have them saying, gee, sign me up, I want to have that, instead of, that's not me, then we'll really get people the help they need, instead of shaming. The real disabilities are shame, fear, and believing something's wrong with you. You know, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you think you have a deficit disorder. And to that extent, my profession unwittingly colludes in creating the real problem. I hope this has made sense to you. I hope you're leaving wanting to lead a richly connected life in the real sense of that word. I hope you will take back control that you've given away. And I hope you understand this is not something that's to be taken lightly. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you for your attention.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with dachshund breeding.
Why do you not get me?
I do. This is what it feels like for kids with learning and attention issues. Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
So we were walking to school.
I started thinking about lunch. Mom packed me turkey and cheese.
She's
I really want
smart.
cheese pizza.
Sometimes her mind wanders.
We should have a sleepover.
I remember saying, Laura?
I think I heard Mom say something.
The sign says don't walk.
Sometimes it's so overwhelming.
I really hope she doesn't
I
have
really
another
hope I
bad
don't
day
have another bad day at
today.
school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. Go to understood.org, a free online resource with support and tools to help your child thrive.